Good morning, everyone. I'm your host, Ashish Pandey, and I welcome you all to the 8th anniversary of the International MSME Day. As we all know, MSMEs contribute handsomely to the world economy and play a critical role in it. While in India's context, MSMEs contribute nearly 30% to India's GDP and are responsible for half of the country's total exports. Furthermore, they are accountable to one-third of India's manufacturing output. In order to commemorate the role of MSMEs and raise awareness about their importance in achieving sustainable development goals, June 27th of each year was officially designated by the United Nations General Assembly as an International MSME Day. Well, to put it simply, MSME Day offers an opportunity to discuss and exchange ideas on how key stakeholders, including policymakers, companies, financial institutions, and the international community, can support MSMEs. We at Economic Times strongly believe that MSMEs are the future of the country and need to be supported to the best possible level to not only help the economy grow, but also generate employment. Well, without taking any more time, we start today's event with a welcome note from Pran Bihanga Bodpuzari, Associate Editor, economictimes.com.
Welcome everyone to 2024 World MSME Day. Here we celebrate the 8th anniversary of World MSME Day. When the United Nations tried to celebrate MSME Day, it was an acknowledgement on the vital role MSMEs play in the global economy. MSMEs account for 90% of businesses, 60 to 70% of employment, and about 50% of GDP worldwide. The numbers are similar for India. The UN says, as the backbone of societies everywhere, MSMEs contribute to local and national economies, sustain livelihoods, in particular among working poor, women, youth, and groups in the vulnerable society. The 2024 theme for the UN is on MSMEs and SDGs, leveraging the power and resilience of micro, small, and medium enterprises to accelerate sustainable development goals and eradicate poverty in times of multiple crises. We're just 6 years away from the 2030 deadline to achieve Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, and progress is lagging. UN says it is the right time to engage in a discussion that looks at bridging these gaps. The theme for ET, growth and sustainability in a turbulent world, is very close to what the UN is talking about. Every business must go through cyclical swings, ups and downs. But the world is navigating uncharted territory. While India is one of the fastest growing countries in the world, economic growth has been uneven. Climate change is another factor that is proving to be a drag on the economy. On the world stage, geopolitical risks and supply chain disruptions continue to hobble business. Navigating turbulent times has become the key. Under such circumstances, what are the opportunities for growth and innovation, and how can small businesses prepare better? Through this MSME Day program and the two sessions that we had on 25th by 26th, we at ET Rise have explored ways businesses can easily adapt to succeed and thrive during evolving economic conditions. I would like to wish the very best to millions of MSMEs across different sectors, industries, and the length and breadth of the country. Congratulate you also for the stupendous work that you do this MSME Day. Thank you.
Thanks, Pran, for your insightful words. Well, now we move on to the first session of the day. Neha Diwan, Associate Editor, economictimes.com, will take it over from here.
India's export has been on a high, with merchandise trade clocking $451 billion last fiscal. Taking advantage of its growing appeal as the world's fastest growing economy and an alternative to China for global supply, India has recently clinched a number of free trade pacts. A model of export-led growth is what India wants to tread on. That said, the challenges are enormous. India may see around $30 billion shaved off its total exports in the current fiscal year as the Red Sea crisis plays out. It may lead to a surge in container shipping rates and prompt exporters to hold back on shipments. India's exports run the risk of being derailed by regional conflicts, geopolitical tensions, and new trade wars. So, what can be done to insulate Indian exports and ensure the growth story remains intact?
India has trillion-dollar exports ambitions, but the changing nature of global trade means it will be no easy target to achieve. How can India strengthen its export capabilities? To talk on this topic, we have with us today Ajay Sahai, Director General and CEO, the Federation of Indian Export Organizations, Nisha Taneja, Professor at the Indian Council for Research on International Economic Relations, Ajay Srivastava, co-founder, Global Trade Research Initiative, and Nitin Kunkoliankar, founder, Ashron Technologies, and President Emeritus, MATE. Thank you all for joining us today. A very warm welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Neha.
Thank you, Neha.
Thank you.
So, to begin this, I want to start with a question to Mr. Sahai. And Mr. Sahai, what is your sense currently about Indian exports? The growth in merchandise exports, as we saw last year, last fiscal contracted, while services showed a clear growth. So, how do you see this year panning out for India?
If you look at India's export performance in the last year and a year before, I think we are performing well looking into the global headwinds. We have seen two wars happening. We have crisis on the Red Sea. And when I'm looking into the challenges which are being faced by all economies, particularly the advanced economies with high inflation rate and high interest rates, I think India's performance has been pretty satisfactory. You have rightly said in the merchandise sector, we have taken a little hit. In services sectors, we have definitely showed much improved performance. But my worry is that probably in the labor intensive sectors of exports, we are facing huge challenges. If you look at India's exports growth, it is primarily driven by technology driven and knowledge driven sectors. It is electrical, electronics, machinery, automobile, pharmaceutical, medical and diagnostic equipment. These sectors have done extremely well. But when I'm looking into export of apparel, footwear, gems and jewelry, made-ups, in these sectors, over a period of time, we are losing our share. And in all these segments, our competitor, particularly Bangladesh, in the field of apparel and footwear, has definitely improved its performance. Just to put into perspective, in last 3 years, between 2019 to 2022, the calendar years, India has added just around $200 billion to its apparel exports. In the same period, Bangladesh has added $10 billion. That means 50 times more that of India. Similarly, in footwear sectors, our export contracted, whereas Bangladesh grew by $750 million. So I think the challenges on the labor intensive sector is something which we have to be little careful. We have to analyze that and look into the corrective action. So far the services are concerned, I think services growth is primarily driven by the IT and IT enabled services, but business services, particularly R&D services, management services have done exceptionally well. In times to come, we are seeing much challenges for the IT and IT enabled services. That is quite visible at the domestic front also. But probably through the global GCCs, we are doing extremely well in knowledge-driven sectors. And once I think the tourism sector finally opens up, we will see much more growth happening in the services sectors. So overall, I think when I'm looking into the global scenario, the performance has been pretty good. And I personally feel that now since the inflation globally is coming down, then the demand may go up and probably that will propel India's exports also.
Right. So basically, labor intensive is where you see, our main concern, and knowledge-driven sectors are doing well, as you said. And of course, services, as we mentioned, also is creating a bright spark. Nisha, I want to come to you, and we've heard some of Mr. Sahai's views on this at present on the overview of India's exports. What is your assessment currently for where we are at exports?
Thank you, Neha. Mr. Ajay we just heard a very good analysis of the current situation. And very rightly pointed out by Mr. Sahai that we indeed are lagging behind in the labor-intensive manufacturing exports. But the thing is that, are these labor-intensive industries really labor-intensive? Because we also need to put in more capital into these sectors. And of course, it would be relatively lower than the capital-intensive sectors like refined petroleum and pharmaceuticals. But at the same time, we've not really given enough attention to the technology aspect of the labor-intensive industries. Also, I think if textiles is something that all of us have seen for a long time as being one of the largest sectors in India contributing to exports. But sadly, they're not really hooked into the global value chain. And if at all, I think what's happening now is the recent trend is showing that we're exporting a lot of cotton and fabric, but our exports of ready-made garments is going down. And the interesting part is that cotton exports are actually going to Bangladesh, Vietnam, China, and Sri Lanka, which are our competitors in the ready-made garment segment. So something is amiss. Why is it that being a cotton producing, one of the largest cotton producers in the world, why is it that we're not able to create a backward linkage in this supply chain? So we need to really do some hard thinking on this, and maybe the textile parks that we're thinking about, that's where we need to focus on and see what we can do in this sector. Looking at the positives, I think we are very gung-ho about the boom that we are seeing in electronics, but that's really because of only two items, which is electronics, which is smartphones and PV cells. And there's been a large growth in PV cell exports, but of course, smartphones accounts for perhaps the largest chunk of exports in this sector, and it's also growing at a very fast rate. So it's really a very concentrated segment that we're looking at. Similarly, pharmaceuticals is also doing well, but the exports are concentrated in one single market. 36% of our exports are going to the US market. So are we putting all our eggs in one basket? So we need to be looking at that as well. And there are a lot of issues, I think, if we really want to be a global hub for pharma exports, there are a lot of issues that we need to be looking at. And, the recent incidents of, 69 deaths in Gambia really put a question mark on how do we take this forward and what should be our future policies be. One of the things that comes to my mind is that we have this global convention on pharmaceutical inspection, and whether and India is not a member of PICS, as it's called. There are 54 members, but India is not one. South Africa, Brazil, and many other Asian countries are members of this convention. And that really puts the onus on the drug regulator to kind of follow global best practices on quality, on inspection, and it years to become a member. So maybe we should be looking at something like that if we want to stay in this area for a long time on a sustainable basis, rather than having these foreign countries come inspect our plants, certify them. The EU is doing that, the US is doing that, but that's a far more expensive proposition. And also, I think we need to have a strong regulator, because that would take care of everything then.
Right. So I think in some of the very traditional stronghold areas, India is losing a market share, as you mentioned, in textile. And yes, electronics is something which we have seen an upward movement in numbers. So that is definitely on the bright side. Mr. Srivastava, I want to bring in you at this point, and we've heard both views of Mr. Sahai and Nisha about India's exports currently. But if I can ask you, in terms of diversification, if we talk about destinations and products, how difficult is that for India to do? What does it take to develop a new market for us?
Okay, so what it takes to develop new markets and export new products to existing markets or the new markets, I see two approaches can be adopted. One is top-down approach. For example, you persuade one of the top global manufacturers to relocate to India, start manufacturing. So we have seen Apple's and Samsung's manufacturing in India, and we have seen the results that exports of a smartphone has grown from less than $2 billion in 5 years back to about $16 billion. So very sharp rise in production and export takes place. That's the top-down approach. But that's not possible in all cases. We have thousands and thousands of competent manufacturers. What to do with their products? So there comes the bottoms-up approach. Bottoms-up approach will be different for different products. I'll give you one example. For example, India is very good in making cotton jackets. We have great quality cotton. US and European market, they are the largest buyer of cotton jackets, but we don't export to them in large quantities. What to do? If we dig deeper, then we understand the firms which export to these markets, what they do. We notice that these are not the same quality, same fashion of jackets year after year. Even within a year, 2-3 times, the fashion will change suddenly. So the firms who are doing these exports, they keep on watching for fashion trends, say on Instagram Reels, or they'll be attending Milan Fashion Week. And the moment they decide, okay, this is going to the dominant fashion trend for this cotton jacket, then they give themselves 1 month time. Today, I have taken a call that I have to produce this particular fashion cotton jacket. It has to reach my stores world over in 80 countries within 30 days time. Now in 30 days time, from decision to design to making to exports and in the stores finally to the consumer within 30 days. So how it happens? One example for cotton jacket only. They will have a totally global mindset. They will not be stuck that we have to buy everything from India, or if I'm from China, everything from China. They say, okay, who makes the best cotton yarn? India makes the best cotton. Okay, we'll buy cotton yarn from India. But India is a good yarn maker. It doesn't make good quality fabric. Fabric quality is not consistent for large orders. Who makes the best quality fabric? China. Okay, let's fly in yarn from India to China. China makes the great quality fabric, but they are not the greatest of, they are not greatest dyers of the fabric. Dyeing is needed. So they fly the fabric from China to Spain, one of the best dyers in the world. But Spain is a developed country, labor costs are high. They cannot convert dyed fabric into garments in Spain. So the fabric is again flown, dyed fabric is flown to countries like Bangladesh, Vietnam, Morocco, sometimes India, for cutting and stitching into final garments and exports from these countries. So it's totally global mindset from decision to design to stores 30 days. So the question we need to ask is how many of Indian firms are ready? They have to change their mindset. And then is our customs and shipping ready for quick entry and exit? If ports take 2 days to delay, that fashion may change and the entire consignment may remain unsold in the final stage. So this is the story of, say, cotton jacket, and similar deep strategies are needed for each of the product if you want to diversify. I think I should stop here. Thank you.
Right. So very interesting in terms of, how a change of mindset and how a change of approach can really help us to go and explore different markets and geographies, especially in areas where we have a clear advantage. Nitin, talking about advantages, electronics, export of electronics, as we also touched upon earlier in this panel, they have picked up, of course, from India. And that is kind of one of the positives that we are seeing in the export numbers. I think the They were about $29.12 billion in FY24. So how do you read the numbers, and are we moving in the right direction here?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And I must tell you, yes, it's a good beginning. Exports are picking up in electronics, but we need to analyze the exports, whether there are greater value additions. The value additions are very, very narrow. Imports are also going up in larger proportion. So one of the mission of our national policy on electronics was to have a net zero imports. And we were trying to achieve a very high level of exports. Unfortunately, that's not happening. But thanks to PLI, if you need to achieve these PLI targets, there is absolutely no option other than exporting. And rightly so, the government has changed its outlook from an import substitution policy to export-led growth. And probably that's a correct strategy. You have to export to attain economic growth. But the point that is happening is, are we having a very robust ecosystem? Just mere exports on a top line figure is not the thing which we should really boast of. We should be boasting about a very good value creation in exports. I mean, you should be able to create a high economic multiplier when you export. Export is just to explore the global potential markets and keep on expanding your market base so that you create more economic activity in the country and not mere financial activity. The larger policy should be economic activity shall precede the financial activity. And we need to be driven by that funda. But so if you look at these figures, they are primarily some exports of mobiles. If you look at the value addition versus the incentive that is offered, it nullifies. So government is virtually, are we large gainers on account of this export? This is the summary assessment that we need to look at it when we are trying to boast about export. One, import bill has gone up, so it's of no advantage. Then you are giving 4 to 5% incentive, and the value addition done in the country also is 5%. And what exactly is the net gain? So that's the reason we need to talk about design-led exports. And that's where I would very strongly demand. India so far has not come out with a very robust policy on design-led manufacturing incentivization, design-led export base. PLI is the beginning, but it has to be complemented with a design-led structure. So India has to become a product nation. India has to become a country where we take pride that at least 4 to 5 products we have designed and we are exporting all over. Startup ecosystem is just picking up. We need to build them into this value chain of exports. Unfortunately, they are far behind into this export. So what happens in absence of this? Some of the companies, they just look at these exports as a routine mechanism. I'd seen in 2016 when your export were hardly 212 million of electronics. All of a sudden, in 2017, it went to 1.6 billion. And that's the time where 4% MC was introduced on 24 December 2016. That led to a surge in exports. That means you are routing. Then I realized some of the companies were trying to take advantage of this 4% with the routing cost, especially on a high cost mobile. It's a low weight, high cost product. So the logistic cost of freight and all is very, very nominal. Hardly it comes to 0.3 to 0.4%. As against in routing into the export markets, you get 4 to 5% incentive. So, I mean, this kind of things are wrong from an economic perspective. What we create is Chinese ecosystem gets benefit at the cost of subsidizing from the Indian government pockets. And we should not allow some of these players to get into this kind of thing. Unfortunately, this has happened. So, and I'm very blunt about it. So we have to correct this. Idea of economic growth is through creating economic value chain in the country. Component ecosystem has to be built up. We don't have a good component ecosystem. Today, even we are sourcing not more than 12% components within domestic markets, whereas China is sourcing around 55%. Vietnam is still procuring around 30%. So where are we? This is a major issue. Second aspect is we have a federal structure. You see, 5 to 6 states are most important states which are exporting or producing at a larger volumes. But the integration with the national policies is very weak. Their policies are very different. Their approach towards industry is very different. There is constant change in government in the states, which is also creating an impact. So the state and center gap is huge. Then the center and center different departments gap is also in existence. So we need to bridge these gaps. Unfortunately, look at PLI in electronics. Some of the schemes, if you ITA 1 and ITA 2 products. ITA 2 products, there is a lot of scope, but all ITA 2 products are not dealt by MEIT. Some of the products like washing machines, air conditioners are dealt by heavy industries department. So like this, then you get into a lot of disconnects. And the third point is our port connectivity. We have one of the most horrible ports in the world. India's one of the best port like JNPT is one of the worst ports of China. So if you need to export, it has to be port led. If you don't have a very efficient port, then, and lastly, I must also mention the cost of freight. The connectivity from manufacturing destination to the port or airport is quite bad. If you produce in Noida and if you want to export from Bombay, that's 2,200 kilometers. The 16 EMCs which previous regime had created, they are not connected to the ports. The distance from those EMCs to the ports are average around 1,000 kilometers. So how do you achieve the efficiency in logistics? This is inward issue. Same thing in this affects your import cost as well as export cost. Then your port connectivity. We don't have any shipping line. We don't have any international transshipment point. Chidambaram ji, somewhere in 2011, talked about international transshipment point at Kochi, but it never happened. No mother vessels are getting into the country. You rely heavily on the transshipments. So every transshipment is huge cost for us. So we are very weak on the freight costing. Freight comes to, it's a negative thing that we are not able to achieve a very good freight. Now, so India has to establish some good shipping lines, India-based shipping lines even at the cost of subsidizing only the manufacturing sector. We should also start now working at subsidizing and rebuilding the logistics sector, and especially on the freight front. We should have high freighters from the airlines. We should be subsidizing the shipping lines where they can carry our cargo from India to the new exponential markets. Even ports like Dar es Salaam, we should look at it. Ports like Salalah, we should collaborate. Mere taking Gabar, this Iranian port won't help. We need to work on hub ports also for India. So a lot of strategic development should happen. So we are not very effective on this. And lastly, the role of Indian trade missions. And I'm very sorry to say, when we see other trade commissions and embassies are very aggressive in pushing exports of their countries, they keep traveling within the country and pushing it. On a reciprocal basis, this is not happening from the Indian embassies. Indian embassies and Ministry of External Affairs has to become aggressive. There has to be integration of our external affairs policies, defense strategies, and our economic policies like Ministry of IT and Ministry of Heavy Industries. All should collaborate together on one common goal. Otherwise, even if you keep PLI and if you participate in the value chain of China, then you are actually creating value additions in China and just routing these exports and sending it and boast about exports. So that's the hard reality.
A lot that remains to be done in terms of creating a robust ecosystem, as you said, and creating better value creation, and also in terms of port connectivity and aggressive marketing. Mrs. I, of course, you keep seeing these kind of activities related to the industry as well in terms of promotion of exports as well. What are your thoughts on what Nitin has said, and also in terms of the role of policy in furthering India's exports? Where do we go on that front?
But Nitin has, of course, identified the challenges, but I think there is work which is, of course, being attempted by the government. The ecosystem is being evolved on that. For example, when we are talking about the GVC, we all know that India has not been able to integrate into GVC because of the factors such as high tariff, lack of custom facilitation, high logistics cost. But then attempts are being made in all these directions. We have come with a new logistics policy where we are aiming to bring down the logistics cost. GST has been a game changer for the logistics sector. The logistics cost itself has come down drastically in the country. The kind of investment which is being made into infrastructure will further ease out the logistics. On the custom facilitation front also, India has committed to the trade facilitation agreement and we have delivered more than that. But I do agree that the element of unpredictability is still there. If I'm sending 100 of the consignment, my 5 consignment comes under the RMS. I'm not sure which 5 will come under the RMS, and therefore 100 consignment, I have to take that much of additional lead time. So far as the tariffs are concerned, generally tariffs have come down, though of course in some of the PLI related sectors, we have increased the tariff. And many countries have a very close linkage between their FDI policy and the tariff policy. And the sector where they want to attract the FDI, they have definitely built the higher tariff so that if you want to sell into my country, come and produce into my country. So far as other issues are concerned, he has been a little more critical of the Indian mission. My view is that Indian mission is also changing. Today, each of the mission has a specific target for exports. A target is detailed into the products which will be helping in achieving the target. There's greater synergy between Export Promotion Councils, FIO, Department of Commerce, and Indian mission. But I agree with him that still Indian mission may not be as aggressive as you are talking about the missions of South Korea, because when it comes to individual advocacies, probably we generally go by, we will be representing a sector or a country, right? We will not rather be representing a particular companies. So from that perspective, the point is well taken. But I think government is realizing that if we want to move to a developed economy, export is going to play a key role. And therefore, now we are looking into a kind of holistic view on exports. States are much more conscious with the granular approach like district as an export hub. We are looking into the infrastructure bottlenecks in exports. And probably if we can address those bottlenecks in export at the district level, we can identify the product which can be exported, draw a roadmap for their exports. Probably the target which we are looking for, though of course they are ambitious, but I feel they are within the realm of the reach, and with these kinds of ecosystem, we can definitely move forward to achieve those targets.
Right, and also you have often spoken about the need of an Indian shipping line, which Nitin also alluded to. So,
I entirely agree with him. Every year we are remitting more than $100 billion as transport service charge on the shipping only. If we develop an Indian shipping line of a global repute, which gets even 25% of the business, we can save $25 billion or more. And then we can develop an entire ecosystem for shipping into the country. And today, private sector in India is equipped to develop such a shipping line. Probably there are issues with the taxes because most of the countries where taxes are free, they are using the flag of that country. So we need to look into that because we are solely at the mercy of the foreign shipping line. We hardly have any negotiating power. Once we have a shipping line of global repute which caters to around 25% of the business, probably will be in a better negotiating skills as well.
Right. Nisha, I want to bring in you at this point in time. We've spoken a lot about some of the logistics challenges which are at play for India's exports. But when we talk about quality standards as well, quality of Indian exports from pharma to masala, our exports have been hit by some controversies in recent times. So what is the impact and what do you feel should be done to ensure the quality standards are met?
What lies at the core of these standards is that we need to have a good regime within the country for ourselves, because we are bound by the national treatment clause of the WTO, which means that whatever policies or whatever standards you have for your own country, you can impose it on other countries. So that's the basic premise. So if we are if our masalas are being questioned in Singapore, what that means is that the same masalas are harmful for us as well. So clearly, we need to, pull up our socks and ensure that these quality standards are there for our local population. And if you're serious about that, then this will automatically happen for the other countries as well. But of course, I mean, like country standards, and we need to we need to be compliant with all the other countries' requirements. But what lies at the core is that our own regulators and our own standard setting bodies, our inspection agencies have to be world class. And it's not just goods, it's also services now, which are going to be connected to quality. So it's whether it is software or any service. So quality is going to be the core of both goods and services exports, and which means that we need to have a complete ecosystem that enables this. And for that, whether it is our regulators or our inspection agencies, our laboratories, all of these have to be of. Then can we, can we create an enabling ecosystem that will support the quality of our exports, and most importantly, do it for our own population as well. So I think that's what we need to do. And also what this means is that we've talked a lot about exports, but what this also means is that to meet these standards, you need a skilled workforce that would that is equipped to do all this, or to carry out the testing or the inspection or the certification. And these needs are growing. The requirements are changing, the global requirements for other standards as well. So whether it's environmental or other standards. So how do we get a skilled workforce? How do we retrain the existing workforce, and how do we add capability to the existing ones and get more skilled people into the workforce? So that is going to be a real challenge if we really want to be conscious about quality, because tariffs today is a very small story of trade. It's basically quality that is going to drive trade.
Okay, so basically one area where we need to step it up to get the quality going. And Ajay, I want to come to you at this point and want to ask a little bit about reducing our dependence on China. When we talk about exports, that is one of the main main factors that we look at in terms of shoring up domestic manufacturing to make that possible. So have we made some steps in that? Have we been successful to some extent?
Our imports from China this year were $101 billion. And almost 100 billion of these imports from China, they are in the category of industrial products. If we divide industrial products into 8 subcategories like electronics, electricals, machinery, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, then each of the 8, China is the top import supplier. So China is deeply entrenched into India's industrial systems. And its overall share industrial product import is 30%. This share was 20% 10 years back. And in the past 15 years, the imports from China has risen by 300%, while our global imports of industrial products have grown by only 100%. So rate of growth of import from China is 3 times than our global rate of imports. And this import is going to rise at a sharper rate from now on, because right now imports were being carried out by Indian firms mostly for being used in their factory or as a consumer goods or intermediate goods. But now, as more and more Chinese firms are starting business in India, like we are hearing of Chinese firms into electric vehicle space, and many projects they are doing, and the amount of sectors they are entering is huge. So first thing, like they are facing issues in Europe, America, everywhere. So India will be a good saving grace for them. But for ourselves, we have to think coolly from a strategic angle whether critical dependence. I'm not talking about normal imports from China. I'm talking about products where we are critically dependent. There are many products where our dependence is more than 50%, more than 70%. So is critical dependence all right? What we are going to do this? So we have to make a list of the products, and we have to throw away all the consideration of cost and start making most of those products from India if we cannot diversify our import sources. That's point number one. Number two, how far we have succeeded, I think it's a work in progress. Some people can say that smartphones, we were importing everything from China. Now imports have come down. We started manufacturing. But that story is far deeper than this because most of our exports are based on mostly imports from China and other countries. So gradually we'll improve. So what's needed right now? After these critical comments, I say India has a very diversified manufacturing base. We are present in electronics, machinery, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, and so many other product groups. What we need is a magic touch in most of these sectors. And many of the top firms in each of these sectors, they are performing exceedingly well at the global level. Otherwise, exports is a good marker of how good is our manufacturing. If we are exporting, that means we are competing with the global best. So small cars, we are one of the largest. Our exports have grown from 3 billion to about 5 billion in the past 5 years. Pharmaceuticals, we are the best generic makers. Anti-cancer drugs, our exports are rising and rising. Ceramics, exports are rising. Industrial walls, small products. So we have good sector. And some of the top firms, they are competing with the world's best. But the point I want you to, all of us to think is, we need a magic touch. What do I mean by magic touch? We had more than 10,000 auto component makers in early 80s. When Maruti and Suzuki JV happened, then it was a JV between two firms, but it put pressure on the entire ecosystem of auto component manufacturers. In the next 15 years, the productivity of the entire auto sector went up by 250% because of just one JV. So we need such magic touches in many other sectors. And one way of doing is to identify a good anchor manufacturers, allow him all the facilities beyond PLIs, whatever they need, we should give as far as possible. And then we should give them time and see this happening. I think that's the only way to do it. Thanks.
Right, so that magic touch is very necessary to get things going and, of course, ramping up our exports globally, as you're saying. And, I was talking to Nitin, I was talking to Ajay about the China aspect and reducing our dependence on China. Of course, when we talk about electronics sector, that is one area that we also look at in terms of our dependence on China. So have we been able to do that? And secondly, what I want to ask as another part is that what part of the electronic hardware industry can be moved out of China to India? And of course, what should we make without breaking the bank?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. As Ajay ji said, yes, we do have to depend on China for the ecosystem as of today. And more we want to export, more we'll be importing, and you can't avoid it. What we need to create in between this is we need to become very efficient in terms of internal logistics that will bring down your costs. And B, there are components like, for example, plastic molding, sheet metal products, which are primarily the heavy components of your product. Let's say you are manufacturing a switch. We are into manufacturing for 30 years now. In 30 years, we have seen we can manufacture switch much more competitive than China, but the freight and other things go against us. Lenovo also had made similar exercise and shared with the government. So if you start making these plastic components in India and sheet metal, it is possible to reduce the cost by 10 to 15%. Reason is this plastic component, when you import a finished product, it also adds to the cost of the freight, and major cost of the freight comes from there. Now, what we have done is plastic molding components are not required only for electronics. They're also part of the electrical industry. They are part of many other industries, right? But we need to have an aggregation policy by the government wherein we map entire plastic molding components of all the sectors together. Similar thing with sheet metal thing, and create world's best plastic molding industry. which will supply to electronics, which will supply to everybody. The cost, if it comes down by 30, 25, 30%, obviously it will flow back and your production costs will come down. So instead of relying more on subsidies, you can rely on these cost reductions to begin with. And that's precisely what China had done 20 years back. So if we have to move at these low-hanging fruits, which are easily possible. Second thing is we need to give thrust on designs. We need to work on re-engineering. We need to work on creating absolutely new age products. Let's say drone. We talked about making India as a drone capital. We need to start building complete ecosystem of that. Of course, we need to participate in JVC, but as far as possible, we should be in a position to add larger value. So the new, rather than focusing on the old products, we should now start focusing on the new products, create a full-fledged value chain and start exporting. That would give a bigger advantage for India in the next 5 to 10 years, rather than going and working on just substitution policies and just assembling and exporting. So it's possible, it's doable. So we need to integrate.
So do you see a beginning being made on that front, as you're saying, in terms of creating that ecosystem?
Yeah. Unfortunately, Neha, the problem of India is state center, as I told you earlier. And within government of India, there are many industries, many ministries, and the departments are not coming together on this national agenda in one integration. We are not integrated on these policies. Like electrical and all have been dealt by some other ministry. Your MEIT will deal with in isolation with some of these products. Telecom ministry deals with the telecom products. But at the end, they're all electronic products which are getting manufactured, isn't it? It might be a telecom product, but it's a base electronic product. Washing machine is considered as ITA2 product. Then why it should be with MEIT? Why it should be with heavy industries? All these things should be relooked at, and you need to work on integration model. Some of these people have tried doing sheet metal, like for example, washing machine companies have tried doing. IFB is doing entire process in India, but it's not so economical. But if you create a scale by integrating these volumes, obviously you will be able to get a scale. And when you get into a scale, world's best people will come. And obviously they will start manufacturing. Another fact, let's say if a China has established a plastic molding industry, for example, we should allow them to participate in manufacturing. Today, they are not allowed to participate more than 26%. We should allow even 51% to them to begin with, at least for first 5 years. We need to open up. Otherwise it is not possible. Otherwise, we'll end up depending only on China. Is it better depending on China, or is it better that they come here and participate with the Indian ventures and collaborating? At least we will start getting into a different scenario.
So that kind of integration and collaboration is what is needed.
Absolutely.
And is
we
missing
need to
currently.
make some political corrections, because a lot of component manufacturers are not able to establish their shops here. They can't collaborate because Chinese are not allowed. Also, we need to relook at border sharing agreements. We need to, border sharing rules are to be relooked at it. If you want to create a value chain, we have to collaborate. And there is a scope. Capacitor resistors, we can also work on volumes, integrate it for all the sectors. Today, unit capacitor see, today everything, it's a converged world. Today, electrical industry also is getting converged with electronics, right? Switch gear and all, everything is part of the electronics today. But they are dealt separately. They are not part of MEIT. So we need to bring in this entire sector together. Wherever there is application of electronics, that volume has to be tapped.
Right. Right. So basically, a lot of aspects need to come together for change to come in as far as reducing dependence on China is concerned. Mr. Sai, want to ask you. We have, of course, delved quite a bit on the challenges which exist for the exports sector and what remains to be done to take it ahead in terms of our goal of $1 trillion exports as well. But what are the strengths and opportunities which are presenting themselves for us, and what should our focus be on currently?
So in fact, first of all, focus should be that wherever we have signed the free trade agreement, let us look into exploiting the potential offered by them, because still our utilization of FTA has been pretty low. US is making a conscious effort to realign the global value chain where we can play a very important role. And India is the only country which has the potential capability to replace China also. But whether that will be done or not done, I think only the time will give an answer to that. But probably we have to look into the opportunity which is coming through that way. Thirdly, we should be having a policy which balances the requirement of traditional sectors of export and the sunrise sectors of export. Because I think when I'm looking into $1 trillion merchandise exports, probably the sunrise sectors of export will be contributing more, but at the same time, we require labor-intensive sectors of export for creating jobs into the country. Because there have been often talk about a jobless growth in a country like India, which we can hardly manage. In fact, I always say that we as a country defies the conventional economic transition, where country moves from agriculture to manufacturing to the services. We jump from agriculture to services, which has created its own job problem also. I think the kind of a strategic role which India is playing and the focus which has come on friendshoring also will help India's a lot, because a lot of countries are not going by the strict globalization principle when they are procuring the goods. They want a safer, secure supply chain. They don't want the most efficient supply chain. There, India also has a lot of opportunity, because in the world, except for one or two countries, generally we have good terms with all the countries. And that is going to give India a lot of things. But I think we have to be very careful on the non-trade issues. Unfortunately, our SMEs are totally unaware of that. We have seen how the European Union has come with CBAM. UK has expanded it to glass and ceramics. We have the UK deforestation regulation coming into. We will have the UK FRC coming into, and these kind of non-trade barriers will deny even if the best of the market access we get through our free trade agreement or the comprehensive economic partnership agreement. So probably we need to work with industry, more so with the SMEs. We have to sensitize them, probably handhold them, and prepare them to face these kinds of challenges. We know that government would definitely fight it out, whether there are non-trade issues or not. But I think once you see the writing on the walls, over a period of time, we have to encounter these challenges. And therefore, it is a good strategy that we start preparing it from right now.
Right, and of course, it can all come together when our goal is concerned of achieving achieving our target, as you mentioned. And Nisha, I want to ask you, and it is a question which is pertinent to the trade, to the trade dynamics as well, which is of the role of climate change. So, is it the elephant in the room?
Yes, much that, we take a lot of pride in the successful measures that we have taken to combat climate change. We are still way behind countries. And it's not just climate change, it's the broader spectrum would be sustainability. And I think that's the context in which we need to look at this whole issue. So it's multiple elephants, it's not just one elephant. And I think, when we're talking about CBAM, which is like, it's there now, it's staring in our face. And if you look at our own exports, in our top 10 exports, 6 or 7 of them are highly polluting industries. So that's the kind of challenge that we're going to be facing very soon. And so far we've had a bonanza because unfortunately, the share of our manufacturing has been very low. And because manufacturing contributes a lot to pollution and our share is very low, we've kind of been able to manage it. But now in the coming years, we want to increase the share of manufacturing from 16 to 25%. then we're really looking at kind of looking at making all these industries environmentally friendly. So we do have a huge task ahead. But what lies at the core of this is having a robust carbon pricing mechanism, which we really need to work on. And till we have that in place, we're going to be grappling with how to deal with these new regulations that are coming up. And even here, I think, we have an array of schemes that are in place, but they're not, we don't have a coherent policy that would help us to create a carbon pricing market. So we need to work on that. Then even this Deforestation Act is going to be a huge issue and a huge challenge. And these are things that, we can't wish them away, and we can't say that, that's not right, because we ourselves are trying to meet these targets of mitigating climate change and reducing pollutions. So it's part of our agenda as well. So it's about the speed of adjustment and how fast we can reach these targets is what is going to determine our competitiveness in the global market. But also there is going to be a huge onus on the private sector to meet these challenges, because, but again, here I think we are taking good initiatives. SEBI has a regulation in place now, which mandates the top 1,000 companies to, to adopt, to be able to report metrics on sustainability related factors like gender equality, human rights, and of course, environmental protection. So, and also it's not just these top 1,000 firms, they have to ensure that their value chain partners also maintain such records. So there is, there will be an impact, but the point is, even if these large firms are able to meet all these compliance standards, what happens to the SMEs? How do we build their capacity so that they can meet these standards? So that is going to be an issue. And I think the more recent one is, I think it was just a couple of weeks ago, this came out, the European Parliament has adopted the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, under which the companies are obliged to undertake human rights. And environmental due diligence, of course, is already there. But so what this means is that what are our labor laws compliant? Are they in tandem with the European laws? We've of course made a lot of amendments recently, whether it is on labor reforms, whether it is on wages or on unionization or on occupational safety or in social security. But how do they align with the European wage code? So we need to do that mapping, and then unless we are compliant, we can't export. So it's like multiple challenges, and the goalpost keeps shifting. So you meet one and there's a new one, and these goalposts are shifting ever so fast. So yeah, there are a lot of challenges, but where I do see a window is like in our new FTAs that we are signing, whether it is EFTA or so many of them that are in the pipeline, we should have a cooperation mechanism where we build in capacity building, and where we seek technical assistance that would build our capacity to meet these standards, because we don't see lowering of standards in the future. What we do see is where the need lies is how do we so I think that's how we can use these FTAs, because otherwise it's no longer tariffs. It is about standards. It is about harmonization. And this is yet another thing that we could look at in terms of cooperation in the FTAs.
Yeah, and like you said, not just compliance, it's also about what it implies for our SMEs and, how they can also fit into this entire gamut of issues that are presented. And that's something which Mr. Sahai also mentioned about how some of the non-trade issues which SMEs are not aware of about at all. related to this, I wanted to ask, Ajay, a question. There is the CBAM, and as Nisha was also talking about it, the deforestation regulation, the supply chain due diligence, etc., are some of the regulations that EU has implemented or about to implement. So India obviously views most of these regulations as protectionism. How should India respond, and what do you feel should exporter strategy really be?
Suppose I'm a firm, how I have to respond? Now, European Union is introducing CBAM. UK will also be introducing CBAM. Rest of the world is not doing anything. If in my factory I make steel, greener steel, it will be 50% more expensive, say. So if that 50% more expensive steel will not be sold anywhere else in the world, but in the EU or UK markets. So do I need to run 2 production lines in my firm, in my production facilities? There's a real dilemma large firms will be facing. Some whose dominant exports go to EU, they may convert, of course. Others may have to forgo this. But I say most of the firms, they started sharing data and unconfirmed reports from the EU side. They may be totally wrong, but reports are there nevertheless. Then 1 in 4 Indian firms have only complied with the data requirements so far, which means rate of compliance is very less. That's point number 1. So this is a dilemma. If I'm a large firm, what I do for exporting to EU, one set of production, exporting to other countries, another set of production, that's not done. That's point number 1. Now, what the government should do? Government should be very clear. I consider EU's all these 5-6 regulations totally discriminatory. EU does not have a separate sky that it can clean. We all together have a common sky. That's why UNCTAD report 2021, they say these EU regulations will result in insignificant, less than 0.5% of reduction in carbon dioxide. I mean, almost, which is something which cannot be measured. That's all countries, more than 200 countries, they came together. They are negotiating, they negotiated Paris Agreement under UN framework of climate convention. We all took pledges for net zero. Say, for example, India said by 2070, we do net zero. We all have detailed plans. Now, suddenly, EU is introducing these things over and above those things, over and above what collective things was there. So EU does not have a separate sky, and that's why its measure only will be a trade protectionist measures. My calculations say that when fully implemented, Indian exporters have to pay 20 to 35% extra on the cost of their products while exporting to EU. And this will go straight into EU's budget. And EU's total global imports about $5 trillion. At the rate of 10%, $500 billion EU will be collecting every year from CBAM alone. So it's a big amount. It will be wiping out their budget deficit altogether. So they may be talking about environment. That's a very fashionable thing to talk. And because we lower our guards when we hear of climate change environment, but it's purely a budget exercise, totally a trade protection measure for me. So Indian government, how they should respond? For me, it's very clear. It's not one measure CBAM, it's 5 measures by EU. Some other countries also are considering this. What we did when Mr. Trump introduced extra tariff on steel and aluminum in 2019 or 20, we calculated how much is the duty, extra duty will be charged by the US or Indian products. And we imposed exactly same amount of duty on the products coming from the US, of course, different products. We need to have a cool-headed approach on this, and we should do the same with the EU. That's what I feel. Apart from, of course, taking the issues at the WTO, it's totally WTO non-compatible, another Indian international for us. That's what that comes to my mind. Thanks.
All right, and before we wrap this up, I want to ask one more question to Nitin. And since we were on the topic of China as well, and it has obviously China plus one has also always been there that we keep hearing of. So, do you think did geopolitics and aspects like China plus one work to our advantage? And does India need to update its playbook?
No, so to be very honest, China plus one In fact, I was also very optimistic, and China plus one, even China plus two was that's something which we were looking at it, and especially the way government was very aggressively going ahead with FTAs, we were looking at very good market access. But unfortunately, it hasn't to the extent it should have been. So what has happened is there are bilateral treaties and multilateral treaties. Now, of course, we are not part of RCEP, and that's a good thing, of course, to begin with. At least till we settle down, it's a good thing. I know why Ajayji is smiling, because we strongly oppose. We have to look at rebuilding our domestic concentration also to build up the skills. While exports will happen when we are also able to sell competitively in the domestic market. Only when you are able to sell effectively in domestic market, you become very competitive in export markets. So China plus one, lot of investors, if they have to come, see, most of the electronic industry, for example, is assembly led. Whichever company you talk about, big one, they are making big deals and volumes, are just mere assembly led, and they rely on China or the aggregators for giving the CKD kits or SKD kits. And that's how the stuff comes. We need to make corrections if we want to introduce China plus one. We need to create a component hub in the country, dilute some of the statutory structures in FEMA and as well as on customs valuation. You need to have free warehousing like SEZ, complete warehousing, where when you supply to the domestic party, that should be the date of valuation, and even remittance should be linked to that date. So with the component hub is available here, the aggregation will happen here. Today, aggregation happens in, let's say, Hong Kong or China or Taiwan or Singapore. So every aggregation of components from multiple vendors, because of their high cost of aggregation, it costs you 15% at least more. If India is very cost competitive country, if you are able to do that aggregation and supply at least a basic component structure, that will reduce the cost. And this I have been proposing for quite long. So we do not have any component hub. That's why everyone is routing. See, the chipsets, Intel is buying from Intel, and other chipsets are bought from China as a part of your complete kit. So we should allow those bigger players to have their component warehouses in India. That is one thing. Secondly, you must also notice one thing. 5 years back, almost 100% chipsets were procured by China, and all the Chinese brands were using 100% either Qualcomm or Intel chipsets. Today, in Indian market, whatever is being sold, 23% of the mobiles are having Chinese designed and produced chipsets. That's a threat as well. So when we talk of China plus one, China has created some models which you cannot replace. You are still, and those models are, Apple is doing on a higher end segments on, let's say, 40,000 plus segment. But you look at the models within 20,000, 10,000, 70% market is with the Chinese vendors. So we need to learn from that. What does that mean? It means a threat. It means an opportunity. So if we talk of China plus one, we need to re-evaluate this, because assembly-led industry will become competitive. Others will be able to stock and supply. Indian manufacturer or domestic industry should be in a position to get it faster. Import lead times are quite long. The shipping times are very uncertain. Forget about Red Sea issue. Red Sea issue is a universal issue. But the port connectivity, because of transshipment, it comes to Singapore, it comes to Colombo or in Dubai or Salalah. So again, the transshipment, then feeders are taking it. So the reliability of cargo also is an issue in India. So we need to address it. These are the concerns. Like, for example, if your manufacturing setup is located in Goa, I need to import in Bombay and take it to Goa, and unreliable. Unionize port workers. are also creating hurdles. They're not cooperating. Look at the costs of clearance are very high. Though we talk of RMS, we are importing for last 30 years, but still our some of the consignment, most consignment rather, which are in components, are put up in RMS when we never had any case of undervaluation or anything is there. But that's the way RMS also is working. So we have a lot to catch up to prove to the world that yes, please come here. We have simplified regime and we can manufacture very easily. Every time the labor wages are uncertain, government keep on increasing minimum wages arbitrarily. There is no scope for industry to represent. They just listen to the unions, and because of political compulsions, they just hike up the rates. Now, what do? You are not able to understand the cost of manufacturing. I am not able to plan cost for next 5 years. If there is a certainty, let's say 5 to 10% linked to inflation is fine. All of a sudden, costs go up by 25-30%. You are affected. So we need to correct, take steps. Then only China plus one will come when we'll have a very cozy atmosphere for manufacturing.
Right, because a lot was riding on the China plus one wave, but I think there is still time for us to fully capitalize on it, as you said, and as Mr. Srivastava said, that we need a magic touch, for some of our export products as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for this engaging discussion. It is clear that trade contributes to national and global efficiency. Trade provides society a higher level of economic welfare. But can India harness the opportunities and emerge a winner? Only time will tell. Thank you.
Thanks, Neha, for this wonderful discussion. Well, now after this thought-provoking discussion, we move towards another panel discussion on the topic State of SMEs, New Opportunities and Same Old Challenges for India's Small Businesses. Well, I once again welcome Pran Bihanga to take the session forward from here.
Indian MSME sector is 63 million strong, and the recent changes in definition mean that the MSME sector actually comprises 80 million MSMEs. With strong economic growth, there is a sense of optimism in the business community. Domestic demand has been good, and India's export have also done well in the last couple of years. However, problems for MSMEs have lingered. While issues in raising capital and delayed payments have persisted, new challenges have also emerged. Geopolitical alignments, climate change, and policy changes threaten to derail the MSME growth story. Despite rising inflation, disrupted supply chains, and challenging global economic conditions, Indian small businesses remain ambitious, with their sights set on innovation and new opportunities. So what will it take for India to be launchpad of successful MSMEs that will make big waves on the global stage? And what is the current state of the small businesses in the country? We find out.
MSMEs are the bedrock of the Indian economy. Their contribution is vital, and if India has to continue with its economic growth, MSMEs have to do well. But is the business sentiment positive? What does the future of Indian MSMEs look like? To talk on this, we have with us today Sandeep Jain, President, Federation of Indian Micro and Small and Medium Enterprises, Nikita Khanna, Founder, Kati Carpets, Vinod Kumar, President, India SME Forum and Trustee and President, First India, and Amrit Manwani, CMD, Sahasra Group. Welcome, everyone. My first question, Mr. Jain, is to you. In my introduction, I mentioned that, what does the business sentiment look like? But what is the current state of MSMEs in the country, according to you?
There are 4 crore MSMEs registered with the Udyam portal. They employ millions of people and contribute about 30% to the Indian GDP. So, yes, MSMEs are a part of it. Talking about the current state, the first stem of MSMEs are the micro, the really small mom and pop stand shops around every corner, or small businesses operated from homes. As India has been doing well, they have been doing okay. minor adversities like the heat wave that is going on, especially in the northern region, has adversely affected them, or the elections disruption caused by the elections process. By and large, they are doing okay. The small manufacturing units and traders who are associated with industry and manufacturing, those who in the part of the Indian supply chains and auto, in light engineering and electrical appliances have been doing very well. Again, as India has been doing well, these guys have been doing. Those larger units, those who are relying on exports, unfortunately have been hit adversely by the two wars globally. And recent past, the supply chain disruptions due to the Red Sea piracy. Now, these guys are they are having huge problems with their supply chains reaching their products to their customers in time, huge increase in insurance costs. And I would go on to say that some of the buyers in the Western countries are seriously evaluating their options to be buying all the way from far and Southeast of Asia. The savings they were earlier getting from buying from so far, they're not getting any more because of the increase in freight and insurance costs. And the reliability factor or the unreliability has increased. So yes, it has been a mixed bag for MSMEs in India.
Right. A mixed bag, is Mr. Jain. Nikita, if I can come to you. Now, you run a business. What are your views on the ecosystem at the moment? Is it enabling enough?
So my brand Kati is actually based out of a place called Badoi. Now, Badoi contributes to 80% of entire India's carpet export, right? And we give employment as a cluster to almost 2 lakh artisans. Now, the ecosystem has its pros and cons, and I'm going to try my best to kind of explain what I can. So we have a large workforce that is available, right? But we are still facing a problem of shortage of skilled labor. So now there is, in our ecosystem, there are no training or skill development units that can take advantage of this fact. So I feel that is a major kind of a setback in the entire ecosystem. Needless to say, infrastructure remains a problem. I mean, we're seeing like power shortages back here in the capital in Delhi, in Gurgaon. Let's not even get to like small rural areas where everyone is absolutely running on gensets, or like, you know, of course, the larger companies can afford solar, but the small SMEs are literally without electricity. You know, the everyday is getting hindered. Besides that, I feel like finance remains a big problem. The cost of lending has absolutely gone up. It hasn't actually gone down. And since we are facing such a fierce competition from, say, other factors like the machine-made industry, etc., we need the government to kind of come in now more than ever and prioritize like our rural craft sector, and maybe bring down our cost of borrowing, even if it's 2 or 3%, you know, which will kind of help us become a little more competitive. So I feel like with the right kind of policies, a little amplification in the infrastructure, work from the government and the industry side, because you cannot clap with one hand, we definitely then can create a whole new set of entrepreneurs and a whole new set of people who can help us innovate. So that.
Well, Kumar, if I can come to you, you run a large business forum. What is your assessment and that of your peers about the current business environment in the country?
We've all, I think Mr. Jain has also talked about this, and the fact that there is, we are an ecosystem in flux. Now, when you say flux, what does that mean? It's the first time ever, as Mr. Jain mentioned, we've 4.4 crore MSMEs that have registered on the Udyam portal. What does that mean? We've never had that many MSMEs registering everywhere or anywhere, for example. You know, the first time we've had 4.4 crore people acknowledge that they are into business. And at the same time, we have only 1.5 crore GST, registrants. So you can just imagine how we are now transitioning from the unorganized to the organized. And the fact remains that these unorganized, which are now trying to get organized, the government is pushing for them to get organized, are employing close to 19 crore people. So they are a very, very important part of the overall ecosystem of India. Now, there is definitely a sense of cautious optimism among MSMEs about the way business is going. Economy is undeniably growing at an impressive rate. We are talking about 8.4% as of December 2023, a very positive sign, which is translating to a larger consumer base and loads of business opportunities. On the positive side, we've seen a huge push from the government on the Digital India mission. Now, that has been a game changer. We've had increased internet penetration, access to technology. We've seen MSMEs transform for survival, obviously, during the COVID period. And, all this has continued to essentially come to a point where this increased access has effectively helped MSMEs to leverage online retail, migrate online a lot of businesses from just being offline, mitigate a number of legacy issues that they've been facing. And on the government other side, you've had a liberalized foreign direct investment policy, which is very, very encouraging. You've had access to capital, lot many more companies, lot many more small banks, competing with the larger ones, the PSBs, the private ones for this pie of the SME market or the MSME market. And I'd say the GST itself, by having streamlined the indirect tax structure, simplifying compliance, has been a big push. But there are obviously challenges which still remain. When we talk about GST, I'd like to see a situation where, and this is what we keep on talking about often, where nobody in India is outside the GST. Everybody in India can raise an invoice. Every consumer in India can get an invoice, rather than having to just do with just keep a slip of paper or an estimate or something like that. And that would mean we would be able to regularize every small enterprise. And now, how do we do that? By getting all of these guys under the GST ambit, lowering the rates, maybe giving them a rebate completely. But at the same time, that would automatically create a bigger finance, I'd say, market. They would get credit access. There's so many things. We're also talking about bottlenecks when we talk about infrastructure, for example. We just heard from Sandeep ji, reliable power supply. Poor transportation networks, they can hinder operational efficiency and create hurdles which an MSME cannot deal with. It's very difficult for an MSME to deal with those. But even when we say all this, I know that MSMEs are entrepreneurs that have taken a risk. They're not just employees waiting for a monthly paycheck every month. They are very, very resilient. They have a lot of patience. We see immense potential in the Indian market, and are confident that with the government's continued support and focus on addressing the specific needs of MSMEs, we can be the true engine of India's economic growth, as well as collaborating with the government, with the financial institutions, larger companies. We can create an excellent ecosystem that the world would want to emulate. That is the way I look at it today.
Right. Mr. Manwani, coming to, you operate in a sector which has seen a lot of activity and mind space. How has business been for you?
Well, I'll start with a preamble, Pran, if I may. We have to just look back, turn the clock back by about 30 years. Unfortunately for this sector, India went ahead and signed an ITA 1 treaty, which permitted imports at zero duty. And that killed the industry at that time. The electronic industry was virtually killed because there were imports taking place at zero duty. The Indian entrepreneur or the SME sector could not face that kind of a competition. However, coming forward to, say, for the last 7 to 8 years, or I would say about 10 years, when the government started to realize that our import bill for electronics was almost catching up with the oil bill. So the government realized that this is not sustainable. So the government started to push this sector and started to give a lot of SOPs to the industry through national policy in electronics, etc. So as of today, as we speak, for the SME sector and electronic industry in general, these are, there are a lot of good tailwinds. There's a good growth potential. As far as electronics is concerned, we are growing at a CAGR of about 23%. And no matter how you look at it, today we are at about $100 billion industry. We will go up to $300 billion or $400 billion industry in the next 7 to 8 years. So these are good times for our industry, and therefore more so for the SMEs in this space. Because if you look at it in any country, more so in India, the electronic sector has really been driven by SME sector or MSME sector, if I may say so. Electronics SME sector generates the highest number of jobs, in my opinion, after textile sector. We are, because of the technological obsolescence that takes place. So, we generate more entrepreneurs perhaps than any other sector. And the value addition by the SME sector is very, very high. So, just to, stop here, I would say that these are good times for MSMEs, at least in the electronic sector.
Right. Good times for the electronic sector. Mr. Jain, coming to you, one issue that MSMEs always faced was around delayed payments. And the government recently announced the 45-day payment rule. Has that worked? And if not, what would you suggest?
It was high time that a stick was introduced to control the indiscipline in the commercial sector, especially about delayed payments to companies, suppliers, and especially the MSME suppliers. And the section 43B that stipulates 45-day payment, maximum 45 days to pay, has been unanimously accepted well. Yes, it did cause initially some disruptions in the cash flow of customers to be paying their suppliers within 45 days, which earlier could be as high as 90 days. But things have settled down now. We have consulted our associations and industry in Gujarat, Maharashtra, UP, Haryana, and Delhi. And there are a segment of traders, these are the large wholesalers and distributors, who are unhappy with this rule. And how they explain this is that they were buying from manufacturers earlier and supplying to small retail, their retail chain. And they would get paid only when the product actually left the shelf of the retailers. They would get their money, and then they would in turn pay these large distributors, wholesalers. And finally, these guys would pay the manufacturers. So the payment cycles were fairly long. And for these guys now, this 45-day limit has not gone down to it. Of course, they are also working towards improving their cash flow and enabling the payments made to the suppliers in time. In our considered opinion at FISME, we feel that this is a transitory phase. And as I said, unanimously, it has been accepted well. It's a provision that strengthens manufacturing units. Their working capital requirements are better, are controlled. But one point that I would like to make here is that there are still some government departments which do not come under the ambit of income tax, and they are left out because this provision has been brought in through income tax, the section 43B, and those who do not come under the ambit of income tax are left out. So we urge the government that even they are brought in somehow. And there is some news of this 45-day limit. There has been some noise which has been created to increase it to 60 or even 75 days. We do not have a firm opinion on this. It's more of a political decision than economic. But what I say is that it should be kept in mind that suppliers are not the bankers or customers. You expect your deliveries, your supplies on time. The payment has to be made on time, and 45 days is good enough time for you to make your payment to your suppliers.
Right. I will put the same question up.
Can I add to
Yeah,
this?
yeah, please.
And I feel what Mr. Sandeep said is amazing. And it's so good to hear that it's working for a lot of people. But for like an industry like ours, and I feel this is unanimously, that has something been a big topic in the carpet industry, at least. It takes us 4 to 5 months to make any order, right? So one container takes you 4 to 5 months to be made. So when we're making that container, we get almost negligible advance from our overseas buyer, right? And in order to stay competitive, you're like kind of agreeing that, okay, only give us a 10%, only give us a 20%, and we'll work, right? And initially the industry, the entire cluster had an ecosystem where, like, say, we would pay in 60 to 70 days, and then, closer to our delivery, we could pay and pick up like finance at a cheaper rate. Now, what's happening is because of the 45-day rule, and it's specifically for our industry, I get other industries, production is much faster. But for our industry, we'll have to pay a large sum because, say, like raw material and dyeing and all of that is a large part of our production cost. So we're paying a large sum in the initial days, and then we have no working capital left for the next 4 or 5 months. So then we then turn to, like, say, banks or like, small finance to kind of give us the loans, right? And that's coming at a larger cost. So the cost of borrowing is going up. And then when we export, the overseas buyer gets another 180 days to make their payment. And that's given by the government of India, that you can take a 180-day credit period. So I feel like maybe the government should look at few craft-based industries where this rule should be relaxed. And overall, of course, it's strengthening because it gives the smaller SMEs, they get the 45-day regular cycle. But for the craft industries that take much longer to be made, I feel few exceptions should be made for the 60, 70-day rule if they're considering it.
Right. Mr. Kumar and then Mr.
If I may just come in here. Yes, I would tend to agree with Nikita that craft-based industries where there are long work in progress time provision to a supplyable product. Yes. So what I suggest is that such industries should actually be a little more vociferous and write for the government or to ISME as well. What we hear, of course, is a slightly different picture, because who are most vociferous are the more organized sectors, the supply chains. And you will be surprised that many supply chains, and the ones which I mentioned, the auto, the electrical appliances and the light engineering ones, they were already following a 45-day payment. So it is not something new for a large number of industry and a large segment. Yes, I would tend to agree that there may be a cause of concern for the craft-based industry, and a relaxation could be made to them. But if we get to hear from you, maybe when we go and speak with the government, we could include this as well.
Right. Mr. Kumar and then Mr. Wadhwani, what are your views on this?
Sure.
We have a divided house here. Let's get your views.
Couple of things I'd like to say to Nikita. The government does not tell anybody to get money from abroad in 180 days. The government says that you have a maximum of 180 days to get paid for any exports, not the other way around. Right. You have full liberty to get money from the buyer before the product even leaves your factory.
Totally.
So, A. B. There are mechanisms of running such an export business. You see, why is Turkey faster than us? Because their time to manufacture from the point of getting the raw material to point of manufacture is less than 11 days.
Correct.
Unless we bring in operational efficiency in our businesses, we cannot, ask the government to run our businesses.
I mean, Turkey is a machine-made industry. That's a fully different comparison.
I just gave an example because, it's the Turkish carpets and the Iranian carpets which are coming in through Dubai and other places today, which are swarming the Indian market, which is what is creating a big problem for Badawi today.
Correct.
We are still in the traditional mechanism of trying to make things, and that is why we are. I have done a big study on Badohi and what is happening there. But nevertheless, you see, here we're talking about the 45-day payment rule. Let us go back and understand the MSMED Act. Way back when the MSMED Act was designed, we said that we need to have an ecosystem for industry where 45 days should be the outer limit.
Yeah.
In so many years, so many governments came and went, nobody decided to actually promulgate something which can actually adhere to that. Now that this government has put in place, now we are scurrying, Are Baba, 45 days mein kyun chahiye? We need 45 days because otherwise we are actually killing micro and small enterprises who do not have the wherewithal, who do not get the money from the banks. A medium enterprise or a large enterprise can get money, can get their suppliers paid through trades and so many other mechanisms. What is happening today is that we are allowing the MSMEs very little margins to be curbed further so that he has to go and get more money because he's not getting paid on time. And he's at the bottom end of this entire pyramid. So the government has done a damn good thing by which, it still needs to take 2-3 steps further. But the fact remains that what is it that we are expecting due to this? Today, you are empowered to negotiate with your buyer, where you tell him, "Bhaiya, government is saying 45 days ही चाहिए, उसके ऊपर नहीं जाएगा." You are talking about finally, for our next generation and next generation after that, will we ever correct the system? Are we ever going to have a business environment that will look forward to, proper mechanisms rather than, extending credit to payable whenever? And especially with traders. I've been keeping on saying this. We need to move from this business of vanilla trading, because vanilla trading around the world is going to suffer. It has already suffered. What is adding value to a product, to a service, is what will work. So stop this vanilla trading and expect that government should look at how to create mechanisms for you to make money. No, if you are having a business model that you have misused. You have paid the manufacturer over 300 days for a product that he has given you, and there are also times when you are also returning the product, saying that Baba, product nahi bika. So what will the manufacturer do at that point in time, or the micro enterprise or the small enterprise do at that time? Have we ever thought how and why there are 4 in 10 businesses that shut every year? Have we thought why there are, if you look at the numbers of people, 3 MSMEs commit suicide on an average every day? Now, why is that so? Because today when the government is saying that I am going to only support whatever is in the MSME law by promulgating something, we should all support this for our future. It will create a certain bit of, I'd say, issues and things like that. But finally, if we need to streamline the way we do business in India, it is an extremely positive step. Just imagine, it's a start of a journey where something like this should have been there in 2006, 2010, 2012. But it's now come where you can start this journey towards a more efficient, supportive business environment for MSMEs. And we are all filled with optimism because of this.
Fair enough. Mr. Anwani, what are your views?
Yeah, my take on this is, I think we have to look at it from a very different point of view, and that is the mindset of an Indian customer. I'll just give 2 points to support, what I mean by mindset. I used to, in my previous life, as I tell people, I used to work for an American multinational, one of the largest enterprises at that time in the world. And I, left that job and started on my entrepreneurial journey. And one of my first customers I met with, and I said, okay, thank you for the order, and what will be the payment terms? I was expecting some advance. And he says, Mr. Manwani, you've made a mistake. हमारी industry में तो ये होता है कि payable when able. So, to your point, my previous speaker, absolutely, that is the mindset of an Indian customer, number one. Number two, if you look at the, today in the electronic sector, we developed a product very recently, and we offered, and it's been designed and developed in India at a cost matching with that of the Chinese. So the customer should be very happy that he doesn't have to go through the aches and pains of importing it, etc., etc. So he should be very happy to do business with us. He is happy. However, when it comes to payment terms, he would readily give advance, 6 weeks advance or 8 weeks advance to a Taiwanese vendor or to a Korean vendor or to a Chinese vendor. But when it comes to an Indian vendor, he would say, payment terms kya do? He talks of nothing less than 60 days or, whatever. He can probably stretch it to beyond that. Now, this is a very positive action that the government has taken in the right direction. However, unless the mindset changes, there will be very small benefits out of it, because people will find ways. The customers will, when they receive the material, they will, send a rejection note and send it back. All kinds of things will happen. So I think what we have to do is we have to run, an ad campaign or whatever campaign that is, where we have to tell our Indian customers, be Indian, buy Indian, pay genuinely. That is the way we should approach it. Point number one. Point number two, as far as finance availability is concerned, MSME sector is the worst hit, because if you go to a bank and, particularly in our sector, which is growing very rapidly, and we go to the bank and we ask for more working capital, they say, what is your collateral? What kind of a collateral comfort are you giving me? Now, if I am growing at a rate of 20%, I can never at this stage, back up with a, for SMEs, they want 150% collateral. No MSME company can give that kind of collateral. So again, here also, I think the government and RBI should step in, advise the banks that don't, there will be instances where some companies will go NPA for a variety of reasons. But you can't, paint everybody with a black brush by saying SME sector, it's a very risky sector, and therefore we will not extend credit beyond the collateral comfort that we get. So I think it's a mindset both at the government level and at the customer level is needed in the positive direction.
Mindset. Nikita, you
And
talked about...
Can I add something here?
Yes, please.
Sorry. You were saying something?
No, please, go ahead.
Of course, it's mindset. But it's also about leverage, what Vinod said or what Mr. Manwani said. It's also about the leverage that you hold with your customer. You would be surprised that we have heard of instances where customers have told their supplier to renounce their MSME status so that they are not governed under the Section 45-day payment. That's the Section 43. So, it's all about leverage, how much leverage a particular MSME has with, small company has with their larger customers.
Right. Nikita, you talked about, not only because of this, but, stretched working capital requirements. How easy or difficult is funding from banks? You have, new age lenders, the fintechs. How helpful are they?
So, the fintech platforms, I think they've done a fabulous job, because everyone in India now, you can pay online. UPI has actually changed our sector fully. From a small person to a big person, everyone has it. The fintech platforms have helped build trust amongst the smaller vendors that yes, we can work online. We can have credit online, which is great. It's a really good ground setting rule. Yes, they offer very quick, accessible finance, but I feel like, SMEs who are looking at a slightly larger finance still stick to banks and the traditional way. But the new age entrepreneur maybe will look at a mix of both. So say if you're looking at a quick, smaller capital, then maybe they'll pick it up from the fintech platforms, but still the larger, whether the requirement for a much larger capital, they still trust the traditional banks. So maybe like in times to come, we'll have 30, 70, 40, 60 like that. But it's important to have them around so they can, we can always have access to quicker finance.
Right. Ms. Jen, coming to you, what are the other challenges that you see for the MSME sectors, or the new challenges that you see that has emerged for the MSME sector?
So retail and manufacturing both are going to face new challenges. The traders are going to see increased competition from the large format retail stores, the big marts, and also from e-commerce platforms. And the large format stores and e-commerce would percolate down to the smaller B and C grade cities and smaller towns as well. The manufacturers and exporters, other than the competition, will now have to brace for certain new technologies which have come up, as was mentioned earlier. I think Vinodji mentioned it about the digital tech. And more importantly, now ESG requirements, which are going to come up, and they would need to plan for those. ESG is environment, social, and good governance. There is a need to create awareness, and we are talking to the government to create awareness about these new emerging technologies, and to allow the MSMEs for upgradation of their current processes, for which money would be required. Money is always a problem for MSMEs, as mentioned earlier. And also new skill sets will be required. So these are the challenges that we have to. Going forward, we have also urged the government to be more informed about these new challenges which are coming up, and be more responsive and come to the rescue of manufacturers and the exporters.
Right. Nikita, a large part of your business, is from export. How is that looking for you, and what can the government do to promote it?
So, like I was mentioning before this recording started, that during COVID, the home sector was at an all-time boost. So we've seen a major influx of orders. I think like everyone abroad over-ordered, and now for a couple of years, for like another 1-2 years, because of the war, rising prices, over-ordering during COVID times, it's a little slow. But I feel it will pick up in times to come. It's just a matter of time. Besides that, yes, the government already does a lot for us in terms of export, and I'll try to explain some of the benefits and then some of the shortcomings also along with it. So, for example, there are so many international trade fairs that happen, and the government actually gives you a ticket for the person on the house, and they give you a little reimbursement for the for the entire cost of the fair, which is great because that actually promotes the younger entrepreneurs to take part in these international trade fairs, right? Now, while all of this happens, when the government says they'll give us the money back, the money doesn't show up for like the next 8, 9, 10 months. So how do we budget for the next fair? So these shortcomings, the policy, the intent is great, but I feel the infrastructure for it to come back is lacking. We get a lot of freight subsidy, which is great. I think it's up to 1 lakh, which I think we should reconsider considering the prices have really gone up. But our drawbacks have been cut down from like an 8% to like almost like 2% now. For a short time, while our industry suffers because we're facing such a fierce competition from Turkey and Iran and all the machine-made carpets that are being made in 11 days, I feel like for a short time, the government should look at increasing our drawbacks, should look at relaxing the taxation till the industry gets boosted. And once we are back on our feet, I think we'll get back to the flow that we were in, say, in the last 10 years, is what I feel.
Right. Interesting. Mr. Kumar, coming. Yeah.
Pran, I'd like to come in on this. This is a very interesting thing that Nikita talked about. I genuinely feel that we're not doing enough on exports. Now, if you ask me why, let's imagine that you have a country that's trying to sell to India, for example, Korea or Vietnam or China or the US or Austria or Australia, New Zealand, All of these guys have 30, 40, 50 member teams sitting in India trying to figure out commercial deals. And what are we doing when we try to sell to the world? We have one officer in the MEA who is supposed to look after economic diplomacy. And the poor guy is supposed to do all the promotion, all the connection, all the commercial thing, everything for us. You think something like that has been taken seriously by successive governments over the last 5 decades? Nobody has taken it seriously. And giving the dole of for 100 people to go abroad and go into exhibitions, I can share my real life experience. China goes into every sectoral exhibition in the world, and China has more than 3,000 to 8,000 square meters of space.
Yeah.
And every year they get new MSMEs who have never gone before and put them in there and say, face the market. Now, how many numbers do we have? What sort of numbers? We are as big an economy as China. We are as big a SME country as China. But how many people are getting the opportunity to go international? Less than 400 a year. And majority of the times, it is people who have been going for 15 years who keep on going to these exhibitions. We've really not looked at exports, because I have this feeling that both, let's say, e-commerce exports, we're less than 2% of the overall market possibility. Because it's very simple things, logistics, infrastructure, few things that we need to put in place so that every small guy, Nikita from Bhadohi can be able to send her product throughout the world without having to worry about what is the cost it will take and how and whether there's going to be a subsidy or not, and so on and so forth. So e-commerce exports, we've not done anything. Compared to Taiwan, China, Vietnam, Korea, we're far behind them, all of them. So that's number one. Number two, on B2B exports, our B2B has not even started. Where are we on B2B? There are no hosted buyer programs that India is hosting. Every state should host hosted buyer programs throughout the country, where they can, production that they have, sectors that they have, should be having hosted buyer programs, inviting buyers from all over the world. Similarly, every state should go out. You see, we've all seen Canada's Ontario coming to India and doing road shows throughout the country. Why can't Maharashtra, Gujarat, all of these guys go and do road shows with what they are producing, what they are best in? And that would make Nikita be part of that Bhadohi, carpet, which is an ODOP product from UP. She would go to 50 countries and tell them how we are different, how we are better than a Turkey or an Iran. So, all of these things would need a sizable application of mind. The DGFT, the officers already know all this. But I think what is missing is, in the budget, we should have an export development fund, which should maybe be 5,000-7,000 crores, which should look at capacity building right from a district level in terms of the officers handling it to an organization which is spread around the world, which is connecting MSMEs to markets, to buyers, to consumers around the world. And that is what I can promise you. We can go to nothing less than 800 billion in less than 2 years of exports, because that is what the potential is. But we are, and I meant merchandise, not even services. So, that is the possibility. Sorry, Nikita, I took away a couple of lines from you there.
I was just to add to that lastly, in our last SME discussion, Mr. Alok had said that there is an entire UP trade fair that has already started. And I was so surprised, because I'm like, wow, I'm an aware person and I wasn't aware. So even if the government is doing all of these, fairs to help, there is no awareness. So like the UP International Trade Fair that's going to happen in September, I know about it now because I had the opportunity to directly speak or attend his forum. But what about the others?
Very good.
So the awareness is, I feel, also a big...
So it is not your awareness here, and I may continue what Vinodji was saying. It is for the government to be aware of the ground reality and act accordingly. have programs which actually do something and serve, and not just have them and people are not able to make use of that.
True. Mr. Manwani, on a different topic, electronics as a sector where you operate is big on schemes like PLI. It's been around for some time now. What's been the outcome? Has it worked? Is there a way we can strengthen it?
Definitely, it has worked. Both the PLI schemes that have come out for different kind of product sectors like the IT hardware or mobile phones or medical equipment, etc. And also there have been capex subsidies like the SPEC scheme and the ISM scheme for the semiconductors. So they have worked very well and they have boosted manufacturing in the country. However, my take on this is, unfortunately, the government is only looking at large, performers. SME is a non-sexy part of our industry, honestly, and we have to struggle to be heard, to be recognized. But this is work in progress. I'm not, discouraged by that. We have to. There is enough potential, and maybe if the government could, reserve some of the PLI benefits and some of the capex benefits for the MSME sector, that would be very welcome. Otherwise, the potential for growth for SMEs is tremendous, particularly in the electronic sector. However, my only ask from the government would be, for the MSME sector, please make ease of doing business more, friendly to the entrepreneurs and to the people who are in this domain, because we don't have that bandwidth of spending so much of time with the paperwork, with the bureaucracy hurdles, etc., etc. If that is removed, I think the Indian SME entrepreneur is second to none, and we can perform in this global environment where, unfortunately, India is not integrated with the global value chain in terms of electronic sector, the component or whatever. But if those hurdles are removed, or we are encouraged through ease of doing business, I'm sure we will have a very significant role.
Right. Mr. Kumar, what are your views on schemes like the PLI, not just for electronics, but manufacturing per se?
PLI got off to a very promising start, but there is a lot of room for improvement. Let's say, first of all, in MSMEs, we're talking about MSMEs that are already exporting, that are also doing business in India, up to 250 crores. Now, can we identify, let's say, the top 20, 30, 40 people in each sector and create them as champions for going to the next level? Where you're talking about PLI, you can give them whatever the offerings that you have seen, because unfortunately, most of these are not eligible even for the PLI, because the limits are very high. And if you are able to actually create this maybe 300, 400 champions, which will grow to be very large enterprises over the next 4 or 5 years, that is precisely what will help you generate employment. That will help you actually bridge the import-export gap, the trade balance, and a lot of other issues that we are facing today. It's all about, creating a focus on, which are the guys that can actually get there. You see, every business does this. Even when you go for a horse race, you look at, which are the horses which can actually make it later. And similarly, in every business, in every office, in every place, you look at which are the top 4 or 5 performers that you can support and take them further. And that's precisely what is required. You see, PLI getting larger enterprises from around the world, corporates, international companies, to come into India and set up is a great, great thing. There's no two ways about it.
If I may, I'll just like to add one point here. If, I think he said it's a very pertinent point that he said that, we have to create champions in whichever industry, whether it's electronics or pharmaceuticals or chemical industry, whatever. We have to create champions. But to create champions, I think we again have to change our mindset. We have to look at exports. Most SME companies, they are satisfied with, servicing through manufacturing or whatever, only for the domestic market. We have to think global and we have to think big. Only when we think global and think big, we will, be able to go there. Otherwise, we will. That is point number one. And the point number two that I would say is that we have to look at deep manufacturing. We just not, we get something like in our sector, we just look at screwdriver technology, get a SKD kit and just assemble it and do testing and that's it. No, I think we have to deep dive into manufacturing and create value addition through IP, through design and R&D here. Only then we will be true champions.
Right.
And if I may add here from the from Kismet's point of view, for aspiring MSMEs, for the larger units who aspire to be champions, as just said by Vinodji and Mr. Manwani, there is a center that we have formed, Center of Excellence for aspiring SMEs with IFCI. And IFCI backs it up with all their years of experience. And in fact, it is the IFCI that manages the government's PLI scheme as well. So those MSMEs who have potential to grow really big, those who have aspirations to grow big, this would be an ideal place to knock on and to get benefit from the collective experience of both FISME on one side and IFCI on the other.
Right. So we're running out of time. So my last question to each one of you, and it will remain the same. Nikita, coming to you first, budget is around the corner. What would your wish be for the FM?
Like Mr. Vinod already said, please let's look at exports and aggressively, and let's look at a budget that supports it. We've already seen a lot of industrial corridors that have been made, and I think that is great because it gives like small rural places access to like economic hubs. So we can keep looking at infrastructure as a main criteria. That would also help, and slightly more relaxed taxation for like the business people. I feel post the pandemic, there's been a little dip. So if we can have a little boost in this budget, we should be good. We'll be on the right track then, because our strength is we already have the clusters. We already have a Badoh, we already have a Muradabad, we already have a Firozabad. We already have the clusters. We just need the government to like come in, look at them closely, relax the taxation a little, look at infrastructure a little, work with us on it a little, and we should be good.
Ms. Chen, coming to you, what is your wish list from the FM? I think you mentioned
on behalf of MSMEs, I'm going to be making a presentation to the Finance Minister on Friday. I'll keep in mind what you guys say today, other than what we have already collated. And our wish list is two-pronged. We are looking at the government to announce a support package for those units who were hurt during COVID and now lately in the last 2 years due to the geopolitical unrest. And ease of finance. I think that is a common point that has been raised by everyone. Ease of finance for MSMEs is a big question mark, and we are going to be urging the government to look into it. And how we plan and giving a suggestion to the government is the establishment of a national MSME bank, which has been absent so far. A full-fledged commercial bank having branch network in all districts. It can work with the existing district industry centers. And it could also be kind of a conduit for all the government schemes like PMG, EGP, and PMMY, and could work with the MSMEs in their geography. We are also insisting on an urgent review of the SMA framework. SMA is the special mention account, and to help restructure non-willful MSME defaulters. Now, this MSME defaulters has been a big problem. And what the government has done is that it just gave a structure to the banks to follow. The RBI did that. And that basically was based on the large, bigger units, bigger enterprises. And it doesn't really work with SMEs. If an SME delays payments to a bank for more than 30 days, doesn't mean that it has gone sick. I mean, cash flow is a big problem for MSMEs, and most entrepreneurs know of that. And they work towards sorting it out, and they are very resilient, as Vinodji said. SMEs are resilient, so they would come out of it. But if you just brand them as a bad account just because of a small delay, that's not really working well for them. We're also demanding attention on the anti-competitive practices of banks. Now, most banks actually, again, it's a question of leverage. They don't treat MSME clients very well. They have foreclosure charges where there should be none. And they don't comply with their own rules about charges and about their policy. We've also asked, I would also be asking for abolition of BLR rating. Now, BLR ratings for MSMEs has been given to third parties who actually do not know how MSMEs work. I mean, what works for large enterprises does not necessarily work for MSMEs. So bank lending rates cannot be based on their concepts of working with the larger enterprises. In Europe, MSMEs are clustered with retail bank. Those guys are more tuned into the problems and how MSMEs work, and therefore are able to give them better banking facilities rather than just treating them as any other business and using a framework which is being used for larger. So any of you have any more suggestions? I'm noting them down, and it would be made part of my presentation to the finance minister on Friday.
You have anything for Mr. Jain?
Well, lots of things. In fact, we will be sharing this with the ministry as well as the DFS. You see, at the outset, first of all, I'd like to see every micro or small enterprise on the GST portal. So streamlining the GST mechanism to enable every enterprise, regardless of how big they are, how many people they employ, whether you are self-employed. Finally, why are you not able to utilize input tax credit and formalize your business? That is the first thing. Which means you'll have to prune all the compliance stuff for, the micro enterprises or the self-employed. So your compliance requirements need to come down, and it should be very, very easy for anybody. Second part of this would be access to credit. There was a time when we knew that this Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister, created this mechanism of each bank branch should have two loans. One is to an SC/ST candidate and to a woman. Now that happened for some time, and then today we still are looking at a situation where there are less than 20% of businesses in India which are owned by women. So what is it that we can offer to women? Can we create a mechanism where every bank branch as part of their targets need to finance at least 5 women every year? Number of branches that we have, we would have worked with maybe 2-3 crore women that can get financed over the next 4 or 5 years. And similarly, when we are talking about gender parity, equality and all of that, at the same time, can we have a situation where women that we are talking about that are entering into business are given a little bit of a rebate in corporate tax, income tax? Can we give them some leverage at least? Like we do to, so many other sections, when we are clear that women are less than 20% in terms of business owners. And the fact is that the Honorable Prime Minister already has been talking about Lakpati Didi and creating 2 crores of them. So I'd love to see that too, and not 2. I would love to see 5 crore of women get into business so that we have parity, 4 crore or 5 crore men and 5 crore women doing business. And that is not a very difficult task. Similarly, when we talk about, the GST, TREADS, GEM, as 3 different platforms. I'd like to see, there's already this standing committee on finance, which has talked about interlinking the GST, TREADS and GEM platform. So people, the large enterprises which have problems in paying off enterprises can automatically do it through TREADS. There's already a mechanism available, and which is not very difficult to do. We talk about having a great system or an ecosystem where enterprises get financed by friends, family, and so on and so forth. But we still do not have a peer-to-peer lending mechanism in India, even though it's there everywhere else in the world, wherever there's a flourishing ecosystem. Similarly, financing for MSMEs using crowdfunding, not there. Why are we still lagging on that? Why are we not setting it up immediately so that you can have so many SMEs that are not getting funded traditionally through banks and other purposes, mechanisms, can get funded through other means. There are so many examples of this happening in the US, whether we talk about the European Union crowdfunding regulation or the US, which has this Jumpstart Our Business Act. There are so many things that are already available, which are successful, which we can emulate very, very easily. And which essentially means we'll be able to provide finance to millions of people that today are not able to get finance. Third thing, Nikita was talking about crafts, geographical indications. Badoi carpets, for example, are a geographical indication. We should have a fund which should only promote GIs around the world. Why is it that we bring every other product into India, that this is French, this is Swiss watches, whether this is Scotch, this is this, but Indian products nobody knows around the world except for Darjeeling tea. We have more than 600 geographical indications. If we are able to even focus on, let's say, 200 of them, just 200 geographical indications which have a good potential of, let's say, $5 million each, you're talking about $2-3 billion worth of export that you will be able to do with a small push for geographical indication products around. I have a long list. I can go on and go on, but I think for today, this much is enough.
Right. I think, Mr. Manwani, I will let you have the last word.
Okay, I have a very short list, so I will not take too much of time. Firstly, I think government has done a great job in introducing these PLI schemes for a variety of electronic products. I think there is a need to come out with a PLI with a higher percentage of PLI for components, because that will really enable us to deep dive into manufacturing. Today, we make mobile phones in India. We are tom-tomming about the fact that we are also exporting mobile phones from the country. But how much value add is done here? Very, very little, because all the components come from China or Taiwan or wherever. So we have to encourage component manufacturing here through a budget, order or whatever. So that's number one. Second, some amount of reservation should be given to the MSME sector for public procurement, maybe 10%, 15%, or 20%. Let the big guys get the rest, but at least 10 or 15% could be reserved for SME sector, so that we have ability to participate in the public procurement program. The third is, I would say that there should be some scheme, like we have this Make in India schemes, etc. So there should be some encouragement for design in India, like the R&D expenditure. And a lot of designing, particularly in the electronic sector, happens at the MSME level, not at the large companies level. In any case, in electronic, there are not very many large companies in the country. So a lot of designing is taking place, and that should be encouraged and incentivized. Last but not the least, the government comes out with these retrospective taxes. That is detrimental to our business, because the obsolescence and the technology development that is taking place. For example, if I look at a mobile phone, is it now a mobile phone? Is it a storage device? Is it a camera? Is it a gaming device? So, you are adding features based on technology developments. You can't, with retrospective effect, somebody at customs says, oh, I'm going to consider this as a camera, and therefore from retrospective effect, I'm going to charge you duty. And that clarity has to come. That should be prospective tax rather than a retrospective tax. Those are the only few asks that I had from my industry.
Interesting. So we've covered a lot of ground clearly, and it's clear that SMEs are not only vital for economic contribution, but also for their innovation and employment. Thank you so much, Sandeep Jain, Nikita Khanna, Vinod Kumar, and Amrit Manwani for being a part of this panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Pran Bihanga, for moderating this discussion so smoothly. It was indeed a pleasure to listen to the experts and industry stakeholders on how India's small businesses can explore new opportunities amid challenges in front of them. Well, with this, we reach towards the end of the event. That's all from our side for this MSME Day. We hope You all must have enjoyed the sharp and insightful discussions today. It is our belief that it would take collaborative and sustained efforts from stakeholders and policymakers to help MSMEs get on to the next level. Well, thanks for being a lovely audience, and do stay tuned to ET for news updates. Thank you very much.